It's not in the face! Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Hey, Not the Face with your host, John Nash, and your producer, me, Steffi Haynes. And today we are going to talk about the overall health of the UFC and MMA. We're going to take a little tiny look at Claressa Shields' claims that MVP offered her money to appear on their July card. We're going to take a look at a PFL UFC vet that has retired, and we're going to talk about law firms trying to get in on those Lee versus Zuffa class member settlements. But before we get into all that, I would like to ask that you subscribe so that you have access to all of this content. Because if you don't, you're going to miss some of it, and you really don't want to miss any of it. Now, John, how the heck are you?
Well, that's a loaded question. How the heck am I? No, I'm good. Good. I had my big annual doctor visit to check my chest, my lungs, and everything. Surprisingly good. I almost had a heart attack though. The nurse was checking my height and came back saying I was 5'11". And I'm like, that's physically impossible. That means I lost several inches in a year. And she swore by it. And then she's like, oh, I'm sorry, I flipped the numbers here. And I'm like, oh God. So I'm still, and I'm surprised I'm taller than I thought I am. I'm 6'2". Well, basically on the dot. I thought I was under 6'2" now, but shrinking. I am heading south of 6'2" any day now.
Is that what you started at? What did you start at?
I was close to 6'3" when I got out of high school. So I've shrunk close to an inch at this point in my life, which is, probably faster than I guess normal. You're supposed to shrink, after you hit your 40s a little bit. And I've done that, but I've become very preoccupied by that. But yeah, that was a moment of just blind terror as I was told I was suddenly under 6 feet. I find that very hard to believe.
Should I go ahead and queue up Short People Got No Reason to Live for you?
Why not? No, I'm the runt of the family already. Why not just make me shorter?
Wait, your brothers are both taller than you?
Yeah, well, I have a twin brother, and he's about the same. He's a fraction taller than me, and my older brother is 6. Well, I guess he shrunk a little now. He used to be 6'6". He's now in the 6'5" category. My dad was 6'6", and he ended at before he passed away. Though he lost several inches, as well happened. He got shorter than me by the end of his life. Oh,
well. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that you maintain your 6'2" status for another 30 years.
Well, I don't, I'm already moved on to 6'1". I just didn't want to lose 3 inches in a single day. That's the part that got me.
Well, you're still 6'2", so that's reason to celebrate.
Oh yeah. There's a lot to celebrate over that. That's huge.
I'll tell you what we shouldn't be celebrating, and that is these predatory law firms that are sending out notices. Now, Danny Rubenstein, who, if you don't know that name, he is a manager of several UFC fighters. Most notably, he manages, I don't know if he still does, but he once managed Daniel Cormier. Now, he tweeted a screen grab of an email to you. And it was from a firm asking to buy the Lee class member settlement. What is this and why is it concerning?
Well, what this is that this is something that we have warned about previously when we talked about the settlement, that there would be firms coming in, predators coming trying to jump in and hijack the lawsuit or hijack or take a piece of it. Various tactics they could use. This is one tactic. And what this is a firm that his email came from a firm called Sycamore Groves Claims Group, which is an investment firm that buys legal claims. They contacted him because they were hoping he would pass it on to fighters. And apparently some fighters have already taken this because Mike Russell had noted that some of the fighters had already got paid on the lawsuit. And and that's impossible because the person that's overseeing the settlement fund for the fighters, they can't mail out checks until the whole claims period is done, because they got to see how many people are making claims. Then they got to redivide the total and mail it out. So that means anybody that's gotten paid, they've sold their claim to someone else. And that's apparently what happened. And several fighters have apparently done this, even though they've been warned repeatedly, not just by us, but the attorneys that did it themselves. They tried to set it up in a way that everything would go directly to the fighters. So it would prevent firms from doing stuff like this. But what the Sycamore Groves Claims Group does is they contact the fighters and they say on a non-binding indicative basis, they will pay them up to 88% purchase rate for their settlement. So you will get all your money right now. And then when the settlement comes, they get to keep all the money. They'll give all your money now. They'll keep the settlement, which will be probably priced 12% above what you got paid. So for an example, if you had a settlement and they did the calculation and figured you're due at least $1 million, they would give you $880,000. And then when the settlement came, it would go to them and they would keep the $1 million, making a hefty profit. 12% in a few months' time is incredible returns, especially because it's a guaranteed thing. And that's the part that I think the fighters that are doing this, I don't know if they're just not thinking it through. If they think this is how it works, they don't trust the settlement's coming. But there's a settlement coming if people are willing to give you money up front for your claim on it. So it is a guaranteed thing. The money has been put in escrow. It is going to you. And I would suggest that instead of selling to someone your claim for, almost 90% what the claim is, why not wait a few weeks? Basically, I think we're 2 months out from people getting their settlement. That seems to be the schedule. 2 months is worth, 10 to 12 to 15% more on that settlement fund.
So basically, they are not offering the full amount of the settlement because they don't even know what it's going to be. But they're making a rough estimate, and basically they're gonna claim 12%, anywhere from 12 to 15%, something along those lines.
Well, as we've made estimates, they kind of know the rough estimate, what the number is. The attorneys have probably already issued to the fighter what an estimate of what they're going to make is. That rough estimate is what your grand total of the settlement is if everybody collects. We know we can calculate that based on how much money you made, how many fights you had. So they can take that number, as you said, and then they can go up to the fighter and said, we are going to pay you a percentage of that settlement, 88%, but now we own your claim, or we own, the difference that we agreed to. And so the money you get goes to them. And at that point, they make more money. The fighter might be happy, like, oh, I got my claim, I got the money, I needed it now. But by just waiting 2 months, you would have seen your claim amount gone up more than 10%.
All right. So let's talk a little bit more about UFC, because I saw some news that said that they won the Emmy for Noce UFC 306, for production design and art direction. Now, you work in the business, so I'm just curious if this surprised you at all.
It did a bit, because this didn't surprise me now. I just realized as I talked to friends in the business, there's a whole section of Emmys I completely forgot about. The daytime Emmys, the children's programming Emmys. There's just the technical. There's just a whole series of Emmys that never make TV time. And the sports Emmys that they won for are one of that large group of Emmys that I had spaced when Dana White had bragged that he boasted that we're going to win an Emmy next year for this. I thought, that's absurd. You're not going to win. I was thinking of the actual Emmy show. I've been on shows nominated for Emmys, right? And then it hit me like, I am daytime, the crap Emmy shows that no one pays attention, is not even aware they're being handed out. So I am not shocked anymore, because I remember that there are at least they've handed out Emmys for everything, and they won for that. Now, I still am somewhat floored that there was not a better, that they made such a big deal about the Noce. event. I thought it was good, but was it groundbreaking? Really? Was it really that technical, a masterpiece of event? I thought the interstitials were enjoyable at first, but terrible by the end of the night. I thought that last one was, whoever put that together, some woman flying through the air, going through the history of Mexico, fights that never took place in Mexico, whatever the hell that was. That was just, that was some really weak sauce. That was someone trying to make a deadline. I've been in that situation where you're just throwing shit together to get it done. That won an Emmy, good for you. But I would have been shocked if they won a regular Emmy, but no, not. I guess I'm not shocked because there are tons of those handed every year. There's specific Emmys for daytime show, daytime court judge, daytime host, daytime. Think of it. There's for all those judge shows. There's an Emmy just for the judges.
They also have the soap opera ones that are also lumped in those daytime Emmys.
Oh yeah, they have the soap opera. They have just the categories of children's programming is crazy. Just the number, there's so many categories you can never keep track of all of them. So sometimes you're just shocked they even have those categories. So no, I am not surprised. Good for them though. They won an Emmy. They got what Dana White wanted.
Now, do you think that we'll see them return to that mega event model like UFC 306, last year's Noce event?
I mean, no, probably not. I mean, eventually they might if something comes up, but that was besides the fact that they kind of stumbled in that event, and it was partly sold to Netflix and other broadcasters. Amazon was there. They wanted to show the potential they had as a broadcast partner. So a lot of it was also put on as a showcase, not just for the fans, but for these broadcasters. So maybe in the future on the next deal, they might do something like this again. But I guess it depends. If they do end up doing something with Netflix, maybe they have a little bit more, a little spectacles of several times a year that they'll put on Netflix, and they'll do something a lot more showy than what they typically do, because Netflix will want something like that. They want something that's a big production valued event. Then I could see them doing that. But if they don't get on Netflix, which, reading the tea leaf seems to be the indication that they might not be getting that big Netflix contract that everybody assumes they're going to get, then I think they drop these type of expensive events. So I'd say it's all dependent if they end up doing shows, especially like tentpole event shows on Netflix, then I can see them breaking this back out. Something similar, at least.
You said that the tea leaves are possibly saying maybe Netflix might take a pass. Do you think that they're going to get that magical $1 billion number that they're looking for?
I don't think the $1 billion they're going to get. I mean, they right now, you'd imagine if they've cut up the deal, and they do make a strong argument that they're in a pretty good position because there's no other sports available. So if you're a broadcaster network that wants sports, your only option really is UFC. So you might end up overpaying more than what you normally would bid on them, because that would fill up your content calendar. It would give you something to work with. But $1 billion seems like they're really pushing it, in my opinion. I think it's much more likely that they will be, if I had to just take a guess, I think it's likely they will come in sub 900 million, which is still an incredibly huge deal, and they will cut it up into 2 or 3 pieces. That would be my guess. And that's based partly on what they were saying earlier. I almost get the sense that they're kind of inflating the number, pushing it, just trying to convince people that there's so much demand that the bidders will push up the numbers themselves. And they will, they won't end up with $1 billion, but end up as close as they think they can get to it. That's my guess what's going on. But I could be, maybe they do. Maybe they blow past $1 billion. I don't quite see it, especially when you hear about the problems that the pay-per-view events we're having for ESPN. And that's such an important piece to the financial strength of the UFC. The value of their media content is about 40% pay-per-views, and that's only, that's 1/4 of all their events per year, basically, the pay-per-views. So if those are weak, then I don't see how you can demand. Those are the only ones I could see really demanding a massive increase on, because the Apex Fight Pass ones, I don't see them being that valuable of events.
Okay. Now, what about this year 2025's Noce event? It's scheduled for September 13th. But the arena that they've chosen in Guadalajara isn't even finished being built. And as a result, they are behind schedule and have already canceled previously scheduled shows. As a matter of fact, they've canceled them all the way up through September 4th. Now, remember, this year's Noce event is September 13th. So I got to get your take on this. This seems like a wild story to me.
Yeah, someone asked him, one of the UFC people at a press conference. He said, we're in conversation with the builders and, we're not concerned. But you think you'd be concerned because they keep pushing back the date. What is it now, September 4th? They have everything canceled up through September 4th at the arena, which indicates that, September 13th is UFC. So a week later, 9 days later, that seems very plausible at this point. I think they have to be thinking of an alternative location. They have to at least be planning it, which, again, it's in some ways the UFC, I think, gets so excited by expansion and they got so excited about making a big dent in the Mexican market. They maybe jumped the gun on a location, just like they kind of jumped the gun on putting an event at the Sphere without thinking through the consequences. They're a company that makes well over $1 billion, around $1.5 billion now. They can afford the mistakes. But it just sounds like they seem to be on when they target Mexico. In fact, you go back to when Cain Velasquez, they did a whole event on Fox, and they marketed around Cain being the first Mexican heavyweight champion, and then he got knocked out by Junior Dos Santos. They seem to have a lot of trouble when they plan on big events targeting the Mexican audience. So we will see on what happens. But I would be nervous. I definitely would be nervous about that because the fact that they've canceled events up to September 4th, and they seem to be running into tons of problems. And when you start running into what kind of problems are they running into? That's the other question I would have. So it's, and then if they get it done, what's the state of the arena going to be like?
Do you think that they could possibly cancel the event?
Possibly, but I don't think they would, considering they spent so much time marketing it. Maybe they'll move to Mexico City or Vegas. Who knows what's going on with Canelo Crawford? That's the other thing. They have this other event they were supposed to work on with Turki Al-Sheikh. Same weekend, so seemed to be the same, Mexican Independence Day weekend. Big, huge event there. That fell through apparently on Netflix, and so now they're moving the date. Who knows what's going to happen with that? The one thing, as we talked about last week or last show, when we talked about the canceling of that event, you have to assume that they maybe moved it to a Saturday because they want pay-per-view sales to recoup some of the expenses they're putting in because they're paying those guys so much money. But so what happens if they can't come through or don't want to pay those purses? Maybe they cancel that event and maybe the UFC moves on into Vegas again. There's so much going on. Who knows? But maybe the whole weekend ends up a disaster for everybody. And then, which would kind of suck. But at the same time, I would have a free weekend to go do something.
All right. So let's talk about Tyler Diamond. Now, if you're asking, who the heck is Tyler Diamond? Let me tell you, he is a PFL, Ultimate Fighter, UFC vet, and he's retired because he doesn't want to fight for pennies. That's exactly what he said. And there's a lot of discussion around this about the regional scene. And we frequently talk about PFL as the quote number 2. But would you consider demoting them to regional level at this point?
No, I wouldn't go that far. They're not regional level because they still pay for large numbers of their fighters well above the regional level. They do give you, you're put on a platform where large numbers of people can see you if they have an interest. So I definitely don't think it's regional, but it is, it's definitely a step down platform and also in pay. Well, there's like we talked about the tournaments, you add up the tournament total purses, and it comes out to about a UFC average pay. The UFC, the average pay is because, the bottom guys are starting at 10-10 and the top guys with pay-per-views and side letters are making maybe a couple million. So you get that's where you get the average here. In the PFL, it's because some fighters have better contracts, and then you get that bonus when you win the championship. So you add up the all the tournament fights, and it comes out about the exact same as a UFC fighter. So they're paying for fighters, for the majority of fighters, I should say, the payment's not that much different. It's just the tops, there's just definitely a cap. When you get to, let's say, the top 10, 20% of UFC fighters, they definitely make more on average, or can blow past what the PFL pays. But I would not put them in the same category as a regional at all.
What about quality-wise?
Even then, I mean, they do still have generally better quality, especially when you add up some of the top fighters. Well, I take some of that back because a lot of the top fighters aren't fighting and they're getting let go to go sign with the UFC. But quality, even then, I say they're better than the general regionals. When I think of regional, I think, there's a couple guys that are good. There's just people that are just started. There's the 280th ranked middleweight might be one of the better fighters on the card. Those type of things. The regionals are just, if people ever been to regional cards, they are something. Let's put it that way. So I don't think they're that low. But if you want to compare them to, let's say, Cage Warriors or Legacy, the gap between, I would say that I don't want to say talent, because MMA doesn't work that way. Boxing doesn't work that way. It's not how actually talented is the fighter right now, right? Because there's prospects that can beat the crap out of the best people in the world that are moving up. It's where you are in relation to it's where people view you as being positioned, like in the rankings, or viewed in your position in your career, your renown, and just at the current state of your career, where do people place you? Is that's how you look at a guy's, how good a fighter is, I guess you'd say. So rankings kind of do that. Rankings in general capture they're a snapshot that captures the current division placement of fighters on a division. So PFL, I would say that when you compare them to the UFC, they boast how many top fighters they have, but they are probably closer to like Cage Warriors and Legacy fights and stuff in the number of fighters in their current position in their career than they are to the UFC, where there's more guys that people recognize as being the top fighters. That said, there are so many UFC fighters that are, I would not say have UFC quality or have stayed well past their welcome. Career-wise, that boasting about the UFC having them doesn't make much sense either. So there's something has definitely happened to the pipeline of fighters and the process of moving up in career in the space in the last few years.
How healthy is the third tier, the regional level scene right now?
Well, it does not seem well. I know we had a huge dent during COVID. I've been trying to get a number for how many events are being held now. I did not get an exact number before the show, but it does seem like there's been a decrease in live events being held, which I'm sure if we go when the antitrust case starts moving forward, they will probably bring up as an example the UFC monopoly power. But on the regional scene, there does seem to be less North American events, and we definitely see less. If not B tier, even C tier. Like, it's a huge drop off between the UFC, PFL, and then everybody else on the regional scene. I mean, it's a long ways away from like Shark Tank putting on like, wow, that's a pretty good card in Texas this weekend. Those type of events 10 years ago, 15 years ago are just long gone. So the regional scene, it's occasionally, the less events, less fights. And the other thing is the fan attraction to regional MMA seems to have been weakened. I've heard this from several people. There's just not the interest club shows as they used to, which means that the fighters are basically financing their fights because the promotion, they're not selling tickets, they're not drawing fans, so that means they're not making money on that. What they're doing is demanding that a fighter, if you want to be on the card, here's a block of tickets, sell it, and then you can be on the card. And that way the promoter makes money on the fans that the fighter had to sell to get on the card. So the fighter's basically operating, basically paying for a position on the card. And that's how most promotions have worked for a while, because that's the only way to generate revenue. Is off the fighters themselves, not off the fighters as if selling them to get, because people want to see them, or off the fighters because, TV broadcasters want to have them. No, off the fighters by the fact that the fighter will round up their friends. And I've heard from people too, when they have a fight, the friends don't answer the phone. People stay away from the gym because they don't want to get roped into having to buy tickets. So that's the way a lot of the regional scene works now. And that's a problem because the fighters, it's, taking more money out of the pockets of the fighters. And we don't have, like in boxing, a prospect, a promoter will sign him very early and pay him a stipend, or a manager will come in and say, that guy's got talent. I'll sign him and I will pay for his opponents and I will give him additional money to make sure that he can develop as a fighter, make some money, and also stick with me. So there's much more of a business in boxing of developing fighter where the promoter or manager will put in the money, even though at the same time I should note in boxing, the same practice of charging boxers happens, just not to the degree you see it in MMA.
With the downturn in the health of that third tier regional level, doesn't that sort of hurt the UFC and that they don't have a pool to draw from to get these guys and gals to go on Dana White's Contender Series and so on?
I mean, it does hurt it somewhat. It's the pipeline's been kind of damaged. You don't see as many fighters coming up and through. You don't get the talent. I mean, we talked about this before, and we've heard this from other people. Brought this up. I think Luke Thomas made this a good point about this a couple weeks back. What happened to the All-American wrestlers entering MMA? That's apparently dried up. You don't see many of them getting into MMA. It used to be so common that after the NCAA tournament, and who made the NCAA championship tournament, several of them, you find out after they graduate, we're going to try out MMA, join major gyms. The numbers that do that now have depleted greatly. So that pipeline has shrunk. I mean, one of his people realize what CTE is. They realize it's harder to make money in this business. But it definitely, I would say, it hurts the UFC somewhat. But at the same time, for the UFC, it's not really concerned because all they're concerned about is the people that the fans, when they become the best at their division, the next tier down, that they come to the UFC. And when they come to the UFC, the fans know those are the best fighters, the have the best regional records are coming to the UFC. And the UFC can now sell that these are the best fighters in the world. And as long as that doesn't get interrupted, I don't think the UFC overall concerns. Yes, it sucks for them that they don't have better talent, but my God, you go back to 2004, 2005, we watch some of the people that were coming in the UFC being sold to some of the best in the world. I'm not going to bring up any names because I don't want to, insult the fighter because I might have liked them. But some of those guys were definitely not top 50 material, let's say, but they were constantly being sold as top 10 challengers. And so for the UFC, they can do that with basically anybody.
One of the big complaints is that the UFC has a very bloated roster. Would you agree with that? To access the bonus content of this episode, you must be a paid subscriber. To do that, go to heynottheface.substack.com and subscribe today.
Ow! Ow! Not the face! Ooh! Ooh! Okay, the face!